Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Trending. I'm Jaymie Ike.
And I'm Gareth Ike. Today's show is sponsored by Red Life Devices, Red Light Therapy. For healing on a cellular level, head over to redlifedevices.com and use the code ICONIC for 10% off all Red Life devices.
Absolutely. Right, we're going to start today on a story that it's related to the UK, but it's appropriate to the rest of the world. The Prime Minister yesterday in Britain has set out a plan to supposedly tackle this NHS, which is the health service over here, waiting list, which is up to 7.5 million people that have been waiting over 18 weeks, which is just ridiculous. And that's happened for years and years and years and years, and that waiting list only got bigger.
Can't imagine lockdown had anything to do with it, Jay.
No, I can't imagine it would. Well, the hospitals were empty, weren't they? Completely empty. I had a son in May 2020. I've never seen it so quiet in there. No. But basically, what we want to tackle here is, tackle the waiting list, but try and understand not only what that means, but also why are so many people sick? Why are those waiting lists getting higher and higher and higher? If the idea is that we're at the pinnacle of evolution, of health, of science, of technology, of all of these things, why are people getting more and more sick on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? I mean, 7.5 million, that's what? About 8% of the country?
Yeah.
8% of the country then are waiting for some form of treatment, which, if 8% of your household are ill, 8% of your school are ill, you're asking questions, but people aren't in the same way, which is absolutely terrifying. But what we want to cover here to do with, how they're going to tackle this backlog is more and more private clinics, more and more privatisation, and a key one as well is more and more treatment outside of hospitals, which means probably more and more power being given to people who aren't necessarily qualified. Yep. And, many of us would argue whether the doctors and the hospitals are qualified, but it just sounds like a recipe for disaster for me. And you see an image over the top of my words at the moment with his speech with some NHS staff stood behind him looking glum, looking confused, as this clown stands and says, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, which isn't going to happen, is it?
Well, in my experience of NHS staff, they always look glum.
They do. They are the unhealthiest looking workforce.
Yeah, they are. Now, it's a funny thing because no one seems to ask the question, as you've alluded to there, Jay, is why are people getting sick? It's always about treating the symptoms. So the NHS, it's the pride of our nation, the NHS.
Yeah.
So why are people getting ill then? And I remember talking to Callie Means, actually, from the United States. So it goes to prove the point that actually it's the same across the board. And he was saying they were celebrating in America the fact that they've now got all these children's cancer hospitals, and one of them that basically you can see it from space. And how amazing is that?
Yeah.
That's horrendous.
It's a failing, complete failing of
the society. You need a hospital big enough to see from space for children with cancer. That's not something to celebrate. So you need to ask the question, why are people getting sick? And that's the question these people don't want to ask.
No, they don't. And you're absolutely right. It is the same the world over. 50+% of Americans now over 18 are dealing with one or more chronic illnesses. That's something you're dealing with day in, day out, potentially for the rest of your life. And that has to be related to, environmental factors, diet factors, EMF, household chemicals, stress. That's a massive thing. You think about the lives of somebody years ago where you were probably walking to work. As a man, you were probably doing more manual work. You're probably physically fitter. You're eating home-cooked meals. Whereas now, everything's processed. You're sat in cars on the way to and from work in traffic. You're sat in radiation all day in the form of Wi-Fi, using all these chemicals in domestic cleaning products. Moisturizers, shampoos, all these things that have just exploded in the last, couple of decades that correlate directly with people getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And one thing that I look at is they talk about life expectancy and how that's gone up. But what about life quality? Yeah. You've got so many people that are on medication. People my age, I'm 32, you've got people my age on medication and they're going to be on it for the rest of their lives. And the number of people that are is increasing. So for me...
someone's making money there, Jay. That's the point.
Well, that's the thing. The food, again, from that interview you did with Callie Means in the Body of Evidence documentary, which you can see on the channel, he spoke about the direct relationship between the food standard agencies, the food manufacturers, and the medical institutions, the drug manufacturers, how they're all in bed with each other, basically. Yeah. The food manufacturers make the people sick through sugar, all those ridiculous chemicals and E-numbers and additives, and then the medical institutions and pharmaceutical companies profit on the back end. It's a good business model, to be fair.
Well, that's it. If you take away the sort of evil side of it, it's like you say, it's a good business model. I think it's interesting as well. Put my tinfoil hat on. We're in a situation where quality of life is deteriorating, as you say. Depression is huge now. Stress. In the old days, you used to turn on the news maybe at 6 p.m, maybe at 9 p.m. and you'd get half an hour's worth of what was going on in the world. It'd be terribly depressing, obviously, because it always is. They'd end, though, on a good news story.
Yeah.
They did away with that probably about 15 years ago. But when I was a kid, you used to have a good news story at the end. So at least you had a bit of a lift. And then you turned it off and you carried on watching whatever. Now, they've got to fill 24 hours with news. So it's constant. So instead of having, that's what's going on, even though they were probably lying back then, but that's what's going on, go and get on with your life. It's just constant. And so they need to fill that time. So the ticker tape is filled with news commentators. So they give their opinion on stuff, which granted,
we're doing now.
Right now. We're not doing it for 24 hours a day, but the fact is that's why you get the sensationalist headlines. That's why in America, when you had the drones, you had people coming out saying, it's Iran, there's a mothership in the Atlantic. They didn't know that because obviously it wasn't true, but they needed to have an opinion on something, so they throw out something sensational. That terrified people.
Yeah, it does.
Which builds up your cortisol and you know your stress levels and stuff like that. But where my tinfoil hat comes in, Jay, is you've got a point where you're not talking about what's causing illness and premature death. Not bothered about that. Just build another children's hospital. Okay. All of this is going on at the same time where Holland's done it, other countries in Scandinavia have done it, Canada's done it, the UK's about to do it, passing assisted dying bills.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just clearly a stalking horse for it. You know, obviously we've spoken and worked over the last few years highlighting that through COVID that was happening anyway, through things like Midazolam and the Liverpool Care Pathway years ago, those sort of assisted dying where people were pressured into taking end-of-life care or doing it without even being told, and families actually being cut out of being able to stop it happening. Yeah. That's been happening for a long time. And when this assisted dying bill got put forward, they obviously put it forward with the concept of, you know, we've got to look after people who are in severe pain, people who are, you know, in a situation where they want to have a dignified ending.
Yeah, they're dying anyway.
Yeah, which most people probably wouldn't argue with. You know, if you're diagnosed with a condition, I don't know what your opinion is, Gaz, but if you're diagnosed with a condition where you literally don't know your own name and you're confined to a bed, I can see why some people would want out of that. I really can understand that. However, that's not where it's planned to end. And anyone that's read any of Dad's books over the years will know about the demise pill concept spoken about by Richard Day in 1969, that, you know, at some point you get to an age and you basically, the state ends your life because you're no longer useful to them. In a sense, that's one of the reasons that, we get into lots of topics here, but why retirement age has just gone up and up and up, because they want you working until you drop. Yeah. They don't want you at the end, because at the end they've got to give you some pensions back and you're not useful to them. You're a useless eater, as they call you. So, you know, the assisted dying bill almost certainly ties into that, and creating dependency on the healthcare system by making people sick. You know, people having to rely, particularly in America, I don't understand how people afford it, to be honest. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. No. I think it's $50,000 to have a child. If you don't have the insurance, it's about $50,000 to have a child. That's how much it costs in hospital fees, if I remember rightly, last time I checked. If you're like me with a condition like asthma ongoing, unless you have the insurance, it costs you an insane amount. It's just absolutely terrifying.
I dread to think how clumsy I am as well, what it would cost for me to live in America. Well, you've had the bones I've broken.
You've had like 20 surgeries, haven't you?
Jeez, eight surgeries, but that's enough.
Yeah, that's more than enough. But this just kind of ties into a topic that we discussed before we started the show, which is people want solutions. People want positivity. People want to have power in their own hands. And there's no subject more important and easier, to be fair, than health to start. Because, you know, you decide what you put in your own body. There was mass protests around different parts of the world in 2021, all about that exact thing. You decide what you put in your body. Yet I feel even today, a lot of people that know this information still don't grasp it and take it by the scruff of the neck and make the right decisions to put the things in their body. You know when you go into a supermarket, most things in there are designed to make you sick. So take that power back, and that's a great way to start with a solution, I think.
100%. I mean, it's an old saying, isn't it? If you've got your health, you're a millionaire. And I believe in that. You know, it's funny you mentioned the protests, because I remember I was at nearly all of them across 2020 and 2021, and the amount of people I saw fighting for their freedom, their health freedom, as of course they should, and it was fantastic that so many people did. And then they'd nip off to McDonald's afterwards, which, you know, freedom is do what you like, of course, but I couldn't really square that circle, I've got to say.
No, I agree. And I think, you know, you see some of these reels online where older people, like people like, you know, in homes and so on, are asked, would you give, generally people with money, ask, would you give up everything you've got to go back 20 years and have your health, but have nothing you've got? So don't have your money, don't have your house, just have your health and go back 20 years. All of them say yes, because time which generally, unless you're unlucky, the better you look after yourself, the more time you will have. That's literally the only commodity you can't get back.
Yep.
You can always earn more money. You can always make more friends. You can always do more things. But you can never get time back that you've wasted. And I think that's the key for us, is to put the right things in our body, look after ourselves, mind, body and spirit, to ensure that we have as much time as we can to, impact the world in a positive way.
Well, exactly, yeah. So to be honest, then I'll stay with the kind of the medical side of it then, with my story, ladies and gentlemen. So this is, I'm saying it because it's the Daily Mail, right, which is a newspaper in the UK. It's supposed to be a right-leaning newspaper. People tend to think that it sort of exposes a little bit more than the others, but at the same time, when you get down to it, when you get to the coalface, when you get to things that really matter, they're always aligned with the establishment, just like they all are.
Yep.
So these are some headlines just from the last little while in the Daily Mail. Like I say, I'm talking about Daily Mail, but you can use other media outlets across the globe. Now this is about vaccine injuries. Okay. So this is just in the last month. I'll read some headlines. Thousands of Britons left permanently disabled. That was in November. My life ended the day my fit and healthy daughter died after her second Pfizer shot. That was also in November. Americans left paralysed after mandated vaccine shots. That was in October. I planned my own suicide after COVID vaccine left me in agony. That was from November. Okay, so you think, okay, that's good.
Yeah.
But they were completely complicit
100%.
throughout. Right. So what these media outlets do is they run with the hare and they run with the hounds. So when it really mattered, when we were up against the coalface and they were pushing in those mandates, and we were saying this is wrong, both morally, ethically, in terms of health, it's wrong. This is an experimental injection. I mean, personally, I don't believe it was an experimental injection. I think they knew exactly what it was.
100%.
But in terms of for the general population, it was experimental. People like the Daily Mail were calling us tinfoil hat, granny killers, COVID idiots, dangerous, anti-vaxxers, misinformation agents, grifters, and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, okay, so when it then comes out, so it's undeniable. So even the medical establishment, or at least part of the medical establishment, has had to admit, okay, yeah, fair enough, all right, these people are ill because of this. Then suddenly, the Daily Mail can bait and switch and go, oh yeah, it's bad, isn't it?
Yeah. And media have done that across the board. Do you remember Piers Morgan? One of the most aggressive, militant, pro-lockdown, having to go at anyone that wasn't doing anything right according to the system. And then all of a sudden now he's somewhat free speech and the science changed. That's why my opinion changed. It's like, no, the science didn't change, mate. What happened is the barometer and the ratio of information got so big you couldn't keep up your narrative anymore.
Yeah, what happened was public opinion changed. Public opinion changed and they thought, same as the Daily Mail will have, this isn't good for business. If I keep this framing of COVID as, what the narrative is, and this framing of people that speak out against the vaccine or claim to be injured by the vaccine or claim to have lost loved ones for the vaccine as COVID idiots, anti-vaxxers, tinfoil hat, far right, all these things that we got labelled. If I keep doing that, then I'm gonna drop off a cliff in terms of readership, in terms of people viewing my show if I'm Piers Morgan. So I've got to switch. Yeah. Now I've got to change. Now, in the UK, Reform are now they're supposedly the alternative to the Labour Party. I would suggest they're the state approved.
Yep, I agree.
Opposition actually, and Tice has spoken out against the vaccine, and Farage has spoken out about the vaccine, and everyone's going, that's fantastic. They've spoken out about Ukraine, about the vaccine, about this and that. They won't speak out about Israel. Obviously, they're not stupid, but then you go, okay. Well, where were they when we were at the coalface? Where were they in 2020, 2021? Well, Tice was pushing the vaccine.
Yeah, well, he said he wouldn't have Bridgen in the party because of his stance on the vaccine when Bridgen left the Tories.
You had, insane. Yeah. You had Nigel Farage pushing the vaccine. He was out in the front of his house with his pots and pans saying that Tony Blair, the war criminal, should be vaccine czar and should oversee the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine. And this is the alternative.
Yeah,
it blows my mind, mate.
Well, it's all retrospective, isn't it? They're always wise after the event. Whether it's the media, whether it's politicians looking to make an appearance that they have a different perspective on something. Like we've seen. We'll touch on it in a minute. You've seen the Labour Party talking about. Sorry, the Tories all of a sudden want to talk about the grooming gangs now. Labour in power, but when they weren't doing anything, which we'll come to. But you've got this situation where during the time when it was very important for someone to speak out, and it was desperate for someone in the mainstream media with a big profile or in a political position to speak out, they were silent. They were all pushing it. And you saw the same with the weapons of mass destruction, if you remember. All the newspapers were on the same page, all the people were calling it out. Years later, they admit they were wrong. And it's too late. People have still died.
1 million people have died.
A million of Iraqis have died. British soldiers have been sent over there. How many millions and billions probably now of taxpayers' money has gone? It's still an absolute basket case, that country, Afghanistan and Iraq. And it's going to be exactly the same here. They're slowly now going, yeah, okay, all right, yeah, maybe there is something here. You guys that we vilified, abused, gaslit, and all those people that we bullied into having the jab who maybe wouldn't have done because they were a little bit more discerning but felt pressured into it. Yeah, sorry guys, it's. But the thing is, when it comes to the next big thing, they'll do exactly the same thing again.
Exactly. That's the thing. Like you say, wise after the event. They're not wise after the event. A lot of these people knew exactly what they were doing. I don't want someone to be retrospectively wise. I want someone to actually call it out when it matters, at the point that it matters. And what gets me, Jay, is, the science changed. We saw that COVID wasn't as dangerous as we thought it was originally. We realise now the vaccine wasn't as safe as we thought it was. So we've changed our stance. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Whether COVID-19 was dangerous or whether the COVID vaccine was safe is freaking irrelevant. The state should not be telling anyone what they should do with their body and forcing people to do things with their body that they don't want to do. That is, it doesn't matter how safe and effective things are. That should be your moral stance. That you are a free, sovereign human being. That's your body. What you do with it is up to you, not the state.
And it's funny, when it comes to the my body, my choice, Me Too, all those, they're very much on that page when it comes to that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Hypocrisy and irony falls very short on them, doesn't it? I mentioned we were going to touch on the Grooming Gang story again, which we're going to do now because it seems to be evolving day on day at the moment because of the amount of information and the amount of people talking about it. But what we're going to cover in this section is how faces may change, rhetoric may change, but the agenda and the direction of travel of whether that be the media, politics in countries across the world doesn't. So it's very key to not necessarily take something on face value, because you might look at something like somebody leaving a position of power and think that's great. This person that's been in power for all these years and all these terrible things have happened, they're gone. But then who's coming in? It's not necessarily as black and white. It almost certainly isn't. So to touch on the grooming gangs, 14 years of Conservatives in power did absolutely nothing about it. Various different prime ministers, from Cameron through to Johnson, through to May, through to Sunak, through to Liz Truss for 5 minutes. And none of them did anything about it. Now, all of a sudden, they're not in power. They're very vocal about it. Yeah. They want something done about it. So my first question is, well, why didn't you do anything when you were in power? It's very easy to sit from the sidelines and shout. And the second point is the fact that Labour aren't doing anything about it and the Tories didn't do anything about it. Clearly, they're just two cheeks on the same backside, as you alluded to yesterday. And we're going to hear now a little bit from an MP called Chris Phillip, a speech he did, a Tory MP, yesterday in the Commons, where he highlighted that calling out this stuff doesn't make you far right. And listen to the response from the Labour benches.
A word on the Prime Minister's comments this morning. It is not far right to stand up for victims of mass rape. And smearing people.
Order.
It's those concerns.
Shadows. People want to hear the statement. Chris Phil.
Smearing people who raise those issues is exactly how this ended up getting covered up in the first place.
That is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't matter. Like we spoke about this yesterday. It doesn't matter who's grooming kids. Grooming kids is wrong. Period.
Yep.
So actually, the Labour Party backbenchers or whatever should be sat there going, okay, well, calling out grooming gangs, of course that doesn't make you far right. Of course it doesn't. So for them to jeer and react in such a way it's extraordinary to me.
He also doesn't say Pakistani grooming gangs. He just says grooming gangs. He doesn't put a name on it. He doesn't put a religion on it, an ethnicity on it. He just says grooming gangs. Calling them out does not make you far right. And it doesn't. The fact that that's even a debate is absolutely terrifying. I mean, I don't know this Chris Phillip. He looks quite young. I think he's relatively new MP, so maybe his intentions are more pure than some. But it's just absolutely terrifying to see that. And we've seen that, haven't we, in recent years, whether it's through COVID, whether it's through people that are supportive of Palestine, whether it's you're smeared with far right, anti-Semitic, racist, bigot. You mentioned some of the things like granny killers, dangerous, domestic terrorist, all those sort of things. They use these things to attack and smear anyone that questions and talks out against this.
Yeah, they do. But that in itself is dangerous, Jay. And the reason I say that, because in the old days, right, if you got called a racist, that would be horrible.
Yeah, you'd be
That'd
mortified.
horrible.
Yeah.
If you got called an anti-Semite, that would be horrible. You know, Islamophobe, transphobe, whatever, you know, if you were called something, you're far right. What? I'm not, what? But now, with Starmer coming out and saying that people, you know, essentially that people that are pushing this agenda to try and expose these grooming gangs are far right, which is obviously what Chris Phillip there was actually responding to.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary. So far right doesn't mean anything anymore.
No, it doesn't.
Because I don't like grooming gangs, therefore I'm far right then. And instead of being offended by that and trying to defend my position, I'll go, all right then.
Well, yeah, you don't care.
I don't care then. And
care.
you know, going back sort of 20 years, you know, like I say, being called an anti-Semite was a horrible thing. But now, if you stand in there and go, well, I don't think Israel is right to be blowing up children. I don't like that very much. Blowing up children, blowing up 4 or 5 countries at the same time and stealing land. I don't like that. And then someone goes, well, you're an anti-Semite. I don't care then.
No, you don't.
Call me it then. It doesn't matter. And you know, when the countryside became racist, that was for me. That was the icing on the cake.
Yeah, that was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's too many white people walking in the countryside. I can't go anywhere with that then.
But it's only ever is about Western society, things like that. Imagine turning up to, you know, a country in Central Africa and going, "That's too many black people here." You wouldn't.
No,
it's just insane, and it wouldn't even be. You'd be laughed out of town.
There's not enough white people on TV in Nigeria. It's a sentence you're never going to hear.
As much as I can't stand the royals for obvious reasons, when the Harry and Meghan's wedding it was, and it went back to the BBC coverage, and there was a black presenter that said, "Yeah, it was an awfully white balcony." It's like, it's a family.
Yeah,
what do you mean?
What do you expect to happen? It's an inbred German family.
Yeah, exactly.
Crying out loud. Right, so I'll move on to the last one then, Jay, which completely relates to what you've just been saying.
Yeah.
And that is the fact that these words have no meaning, of course, which I've alluded to. But this is what I mean by it, right? So there's a program in America called The View, which I think is hosted by, it's a panel, but the main sort of players, Whoopi Goldberg.
It's basically loose women, isn't it?
It's basically loose women for people that have Trump living in their head permanently, to be honest. Now, Whoopi Goldberg, I liked her when she was running away from Patrick Swayze in Ghost. I thought she was great in that. I liked her in Sister Act. And I liked the fact that we used to joke that she'd married Michael Cushion, because that made me laugh, right? That I enjoyed. The new Whoopi Goldberg, not a huge fan of, right? So actually, in this instance, she's not necessarily the guilty party, but they're all sat there and they're talking about January 6th, because obviously yesterday was January 6th.
Yep.
So they're talking about Trump. Like I said, he lives rent-free in their head. Now, the presenter, what's her name? Sunny Hostin, if I'm saying that
Some
right.
good names here, isn't there?
There are some great names, yeah. Whoopi Goldberg, Sunny Hostin. Sound like a pair of boxers.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
So anyway, she gives this big diatribe monologue, and she says she's comparing January 6th to slavery. I mean, it seems a bit over the top. She compares it to World War II. Now, our granddad fought in World War II. I don't know what he'd say about that if he was still alive.
Yeah.
And she also compares it to the Holocaust. Now, what I find amusing about that is anyone mentioning the Holocaust, right, basically, whoa, don't mention that. You're in big trouble. But you can compare January 6th to it. That's fine. Don't worry about it. But it's such an over-exaggeration, and it's so ridiculous that actually, like I say, it takes away the meaning of words.
Well, yeah, over 73 million people minimum died in World War II alone.
I can imagine how January the 6th was similar to 73 million people dying across the planet. It's honestly, it's such lunacy. And the reason I say it's dangerous is because there are racists around. There are people that are far right and dangerous. There are people that hate Jewish people simply for being Jewish people. You know, I've spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, and you know, some of the graffiti and some of the things, and people might watching this will go, it's only graffiti, but at the same time, the intent behind it's pretty dark. You know, some of the graffiti I've seen is pretty weird.
Yep.
You know, in various places in Eastern Europe, the synagogues have armed guards out the front of them. That's not normal. So it does exist, right? But by making everything it,
Yep.
then you create a position where nothing is it. So now if I hear someone say, oh yeah, he's far right, I go, is he?
It's the old-fashioned...
Probably not.
It's the old-fashioned boy that cried wolf story, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you cry
And it's
wolf so many
dangerous.
times that you just, you know, eventually it has no power.
No, exactly. And I don't think that's a good thing. I think words are important. I think they matter. I think the truth matters for one thing. But if you are at a point where everything is racist, then nothing's racist. And if everything's anti-Semitic, then nothing is anti-Semitic. And, you know, if everything is compared to World War II, the Holocaust and slavery, then what is the point?
No, there is no point. 100%. It's a very, very dangerous precedent that's been set, and it's not by accident at all.
No, not at all. They take away the meaning of things. Everything becomes amalgamated into nothing. You could throw immigration into the pot of that, where you know, we should celebrate immigration or mass unfiltered immigration. I say we should celebrate that because it creates a diversity. Yeah, but it doesn't. It creates the opposite of that. Everything just becomes Everything just joins in together and becomes a ball of nothingness, as opposed to actually going, well, you know, I'm going to go to that country and that culture is like that, and I'm going to go to that place and that culture is like that. And that's great. All of a sudden, you throw everything into everyone. It's like having loads of different ingredients and going, these are on their own. They're incredible ingredients, and you can combine some of them together, and it's fantastic. And you've got a big melting pot. I sound like David Brent, but then you chuck all those ingredients in the pot all at the same time, stick the heater right up to full, and go, there you go. Well, ain't going to work. It's not going to be nice.
No, it's not. You travel because you want to experience different cultures and see how different people live. Everyone lives, unless you're a Brit going to Spain, where you want a chippy and a Sunday roast. But
cerveza, garçon.
But most people travel because they want to experience different cultures. And if you know, this sort of nothing culture where everything's amalgamated, that makes the world quite a dull place. If everyone thought and acted the same and dressed the same.
But that's what they want, though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is.
They want
well, it's communism, socialism type mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, everyone's the same, and they're not. Let's celebrate differences, 100%.
100%. We're just going to finish on one tiny story just because we touched on it yesterday. I thought this was quite a funny one to finish on, where we're talking about faces change, but rhetoric doesn't. These are the potential replacements for Justin Trudeau, who we mentioned yesterday might have resigned. Well, he now has. He did a few hours after that. These are the potential replacements of him for the head of the Liberal Party, who will obviously face up against the guy you spoke about yesterday at the next election. Christia Freeland, former Deputy PM, WEF.
Oh,
Mark,
she's vicious.
Mark Kearney, former central banker, WEF. Francis Philippe Champagne, what a name that is.
Fantastic name. Not his
WEF.
real name, I bet. I bet it's Dave Smith.
No, it's Francis Philippe Brute, probably. That was bad, wasn't it?
Yeah.
WEF. And then Melanie Jolly, who I think is the favourite so far from what I've been reading, Minister of Foreign Affairs, WEF young leader. So rhetoric changes, faces may change, but it looks like the Canadians, whichever way they choose, whether they choose your man yesterday or any of these, they're going to have the same agenda that they've had under Trudeau. So
You didn't want to say Pierre Polvier, did you?
No.
Because you keep saying your man yesterday.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, I couldn't remember his name. I knew it was Pierre.
Pierre Polvier. Well, it was the same here, wasn't it? We had Starmer versus Sunak, two
WEF.
World Economic Forum geezers. That's the thing, you know. And when we talk like this, and I know it's the same when Dad talks like this, well, what am I supposed to do then? Well, everyone's looking for a saviour. Everyone's looking for a saviour all the time. In every different place, they will look for a saviour, apart from the freaking mirror.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The mirror is the best way to start. We spoke about it earlier with health. You know, you decide where you start. That's a great place to start. And not giving your power away to others is, you know, the ultimate sign of freedom.
Absolutely.
Right, thank you very much for joining us today. Today's show was brought to you in association with APE Nutrition, bringing British organic specialist food products to the supplement market. Head over to apenutrition.co.uk and use the code ICONICMedia for 10% off.
Cheers.
We'll see you tomorrow.